Today we're going to be talking about solving a dispute in a purely democratic environment. Deep Dives, episode 49. Well, Destry.
Yes.
It's been a while.
It's been a week.
Yeah.
We didn't record last week for whatever reason. One of y'all did something funky. I don't know.
Well, so lately we've been having to adjust our schedule a little bit around some church projects and stuff.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah,
That's
usually
what it
every other Thursday morning,
Yeah.
I'm involved in a pre-construction meeting
was. Right,
for the
right,
new
right, right.
buildings.
Yeah.
So that's had to caused us to have to adjust our schedule, and we usually move it to Saturdays. But then this past Saturday, you had a scheduling conflict, and so we couldn't get Saturday.
I
either.
didn't initially have a scheduling conflict.
I'm trying to keep it.
Everything was working out perfectly until I locked the keys in the car, in the van, on an outing for our photography club. Which
I was trying to keep that out of it and just leave it at you had a scheduling conflict.
I can't leave it like that. So we couldn't have been any farther away anywhere in Pensacola.
Right.
We're on the very tip of Fort Pickens. Mm-hmm. And that's a peninsula that, think about where a fort was built.
No, I think it's a barrier island.
The barrier island, so that's not called a peninsula out there?
A peninsula is where 3 of the 4 sides are surrounded by water.
So it's a barrier island is what you call it?
Yeah.
It was the fort was strategically built there, right?
Right, yeah.
So they got to come by here in order to get there, right? So it's the first place so in other words, it's the farthest place away from all the important stuff. And
it's the first thing you hit when coming from the ocean.
Yep. And we were out having a good time. It was great weather, meaning it was overcast, good for pictures. The breeze was blowing. I went through a period where I would lose my keys and I just would misplace them. I didn't know where they were 4 years ago. So I started putting a ring on my belt. What is that called? A climber's.
Oh, like a D-ring or something?
Yes.
Carabiner?
Carabiner on my belt loop, and I'd put my keys on it. Never lose them. They're always there. I know where they are. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I know where my keys are. And I don't really like having things in my pockets. Mm-hmm. So this is a perfect solution for me. And for a good 2 years, not a problem. Until last Saturday, whenever I have 2 keys. I broke a streak. So I've got the van keys and I've got my car and house keys. So that I should have known. That's the recipe, Destry, for failure. I didn't want to carry a lot of them around, so I took my van key or my car key and I put it in my pouch that I carry with all my money and medications, all this, and I took the van key. If you're watching, you'll see what I do. Took the van key, and it had a big, nice loop on it. And I took it down here where the carabiner is, clicked it on the carabiner, secured it. All right, we're good to go. Got out of the van, did our thing for an hour and a half. Everybody had a good time. We got back to the van at 12:30 when we were meeting. So I take the key out, take the key off the carabiner, and look at it and go, this looks like my Ford key. And it was. Mm-hmm. It was my Ford key.
But your Ford key was miles away.
My Ford was 20 miles away. It was, and I looked and I went, and I knew the second I did it, I looked at everybody on the other side of the van. I was at the driver's side. Everybody on the other side of the van was anticipating getting in the van, getting their lunch, getting off their feet. And I just thought, there's nothing I have to. So I walked around and I checked all the doors. And I looked at our friend Don and said, Don, see this key? This is my car key. This is not the van key. He said, really? He said, where's the van key? I said, I have no idea. That's the way I broke it, everybody. And so come to find out, what I did was I did the right thing, but I didn't actually hook the key onto the carabiner. I went through the motions, but I didn't secure the carabiner. I usually click it on the carabiner, and then I screw the thing on, the safety. I screw it on and make sure it's on there, but I just clicked it on there, and I didn't do that. We found the van key in the seat, my driver's seat, right where that would have happened. So that's exactly what I did.
Right.
And man, I was hard on myself. Man, it was tough because I do stuff like this, but Josh, when it affects other people, it so bothers me.
Yeah, it's okay when it's just you. But
I get over it.
People, yeah.
I get mad at myself. I go, man, but I kind of expect it. You know what I mean? But this time it affected 7 other people.
Right.
Like, man.
Well, it's funny because the night before I was really struggling. Should I go to the Fort Pickens thing?
Yeah,
because I haven't been to Fort Pickens in years. And I've been wanting to.
So
go.
Great.
It was so tempting
cool
to go, but I'm like, man, no, because I really have to do this. I had some things I had to do over the weekend. I didn't have an opportunity to do over the week, and so I finally just accepted my fate, and I'm like.
Yeah.
And I text you guys. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to go. This is my only chance,
my
only opportunity to do X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
And one of the things that was looming on my plate too is I had to be back by a specific time to help my wife deliver, because she makes wedding cakes and birthday cakes and all that kind of stuff. And usually on the particularly large orders, she needs my help.
Saturday is a big day for her.
Yeah, that's
Delivery
when all
day.
the parties are.
Yeah,
Saturdays and Sundays.
Those deliverables are due.
Yeah. And she had a 3-tier cake, which is both heavy and unstable. So kind of like me. So she needed my help with it because it takes strength to move these large things, And so I'm like, well, I that's another reason, because if I'm out there, I'm not in control when I come back, and I need to be back by a certain time. And if anything goes wrong, I won't be able to. And I even told her, while we were delivering, I'm like, it's a good thing I didn't go, because had I gone, I would not be here right now, and you would be
I would have
just out of luck.
It would have been a horrible situation. It took an hour and a half. It added an hour and a half, and that would have put you past deadline, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Oh my goodness! Thank God you didn't go, man.
It all worked out for me.
It all worked out for you. And really, and everybody was so nice, including Chris. Chris was there, our sound guy and video guy. Everybody was so good. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They were, but that, and I appreciated that. And the farther we get away from that day, the more I appreciate that. But it's hard to console somebody whenever it's internal. You know what I mean? When it's internal and it's it just. And
I can almost picture how you were out there, because I know your personality well enough to know you were inconsolable.
Don came up to me afterwards and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "You sure are quiet." And I said, "That's pretty much how I get."
Yeah,
that's how I get. You know what I mean? Whenever I'm that way, I get really quiet.
Yeah,
and that's the way.
Because in your head, you're self-destructing.
I am totally self-destructing.
Yeah,
I've gotten better because I have overall. I've gotten better at all stuff like that, the little stupid things that happen in life. But thank God Chris was there on the way home, because he likes to talk. So he just talked the whole time, and everybody talked the whole time, and I wasn't. Right. Nobody. I got to interrupt people whenever I want to talk anyway, because everybody likes to talk to each other. Yeah. You know what I mean? So nobody's depending on me to talk.
Right.
So I can just kind of drive and be good.
Well, so, since we met, since we recorded our last episode, a lot has happened in the world.
Man.
We had a major election.
So did.
And it's interesting how...
This is November 2024.
Yeah, November 2024. We just had the election. Our president hasn't changed yet, but it will be changing as a result of the election.
President-elect, right?
Yeah, president-elect. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to see how the world is how the world has adjusted in response to that news, because the election of president has become increasingly polarizing.
Man, has it
over
ever.
the past generation, right?
Wow.
I remember George W. Being elected, and the controversy around that election between him and Al Gore, and accusations of a stolen election and things like that.
Right.
The controversy around the integrity of ballots and all those types of arguments. And then I remember, the controversy when Obama was first elected, and then when he was elected again. And it's like over and over again. It seems like every election has such controversy around it that grows with each election. It's almost like, where's the tipping point going to be?
And are you ever able to go back once that has been introduced?
Right. And so the rhetoric surrounding this election seems to have been even greater than the rhetoric around the last time that Donald Trump was elected. It's the end of our democracy. It's the America is guilty of any number of ideological sins, whether it's misogyny or racism or all this different stuff. And both sides were claiming this election could potentially be our last election, because it's this. We're not just battling for president; we're battling for the soul of the country and for the all this. But then on the day after the election, everybody's freaking out. You have one side that's just, we're all gonna die. It's our country's been destroyed, all this stuff, and the other side is the exact opposite. It's like, we finally saved our country.
That's crazy. Isn't it?
And so it's like the polarization reached a climax at that point. But then it seems like a week later, everybody's kind of used to the news, and you see even President Biden saying it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And you see Kamala Harris as she gives her concession speech. It's like, we're going to survive this, but we need to still fight. But it seems like the rhetoric sort of ramps down once America's decision has been made. I mean, obviously, there's still rhetoric on both sides about the survival of our nation, and everything. But what was your take on all this stuff?
I didn't allow myself to even entertain the possibility of Harris winning. To me, just because I didn't think it would happen, for one, and for two, it was just to be selfish. There was a lot of other personal things right in front of my face that I needed to take care of, that I could busy myself with. So I didn't pay a whole bunch of attention to this year. and another reason is that of late I've been making an effort to embrace thoughts and people, schools of thought that I do not subscribe to. And when I say embrace, I mean tip my toe in and go, I want to hear your point of view, instead of shuffling through a YouTube video just because there's something about gay rights or something about abortion or something. Many times I'll just go right through that.
You don't want to feed the algorithm.
I don't want to feed the algorithm, and there's nothing that you have to say that I'm interested in.
Right.
But that's an error. That last thing I just said is an error. I am interested. I want to be more interested.
Yeah.
In what?
Interested in the opposing viewpoint.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I want to, but I think that's a way to embrace other people. And I wonder why I haven't done that before to a bigger extent than what I've already doing. Really, in many ways, if I don't do that, then I'm just as guilty as I tend to accuse the other, quote, the other side of doing things.
Right.
Of cutting people off and doing, just not not having open mind is not what I want to say, but just having a dialogue,
right?
Having a conversation,
not being afraid of an opposing opinion,
not being afraid. Why should we be afraid of it?
Yeah.
And for me, I can't speak for anybody else. For me, it's maybe a little bit of insecurity in myself. So I ask myself, what am I insecure about? I'm certainly not insecure about my faith, about my life after death, my relationship with Christ. I'm not at all. I'm 100%. There's nothing anybody can say that would question, that would make me go, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe it's Jesus. It's just not. So why should I worry about that? You know, so that's not it. The abortion issue, man, I just don't. In many ways, that goes hand in hand. I can't fathom anybody saying anything to me ever that would make me go, well, maybe at conception, maybe that's not our life.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not until 2 weeks. Maybe it's not until they take their first breath on their own. Man, I can't even imagine thinking like that.
Right.
So why am I worried about seeing somebody on YouTube talk about that? And whenever I've done that, it strengthened all the pillars that I have in belief. Because I haven't heard anybody say anything that I haven't chuckled at and went, that's your stance?
Yeah.
There's no basis. There's no basis to it.
Right.
You know, so I'm watching these guys on YouTube. The guys, I can't remember their names. They go to college campuses, and hundreds of people stand in line to ask these guys questions out on a microphone. Many times it's about abortion. It's about faith, and lately it's been about the candidates and all this stuff. And what the people that are there, the evangelists, I'll just say, they're there. They're inviting anybody to say anything and ask any question.
Yeah, sometimes it's not an evangelist. It's just someone with an opinion and wants to open up for debate.
Right.
So more like a host, right?
A host. Yeah. Yep. He hosts. He has a microphone too, and that's all it is. And you see people come up to the microphone. They're mostly students. They like to go to campuses. And I'm trying to be open-minded about this. And I know it could be an editing thing, but man, a lot of the people that get up to the mic and start asking questions, it's funny to watch them because they're so confident. You know, they're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get." Nobody's ever asked them this question before. Yeah. I mean, I got them because they ask these pointed questions. So you say you're a Christian, right? And you do believe in the Bible, right? And you do believe this, right? They get that established, and then they come in with this, what they think is the hard-hitting question that's going to prove their point. It's going to really, and the guy or the girl answers and gives such a straight answer that this person on the other side has never heard, and they go, I don't have anything to say about that.
Right.
Well, because you don't have anything to, I haven't yet heard anything that's even a good.
They don't have any foundation.
There's no foundation.
They have a library of memes.
Again, it's just what I've seen on YouTube,
Right.
and it's edited, and I know it could be maybe. I'd like to see 50 people interviewed that actually had a good point, and the guy the person there saying, that's a good point. I've seen a little bit of that, but not anything.
Yeah.
I'd be afraid to do that, but look at it on my YouTube. I'd be afraid what the algorithm would do. Where are they going to send me now if I start looking for that?
Well, so you've kind of got us into the part that we're going to discuss today, because I wanted to start it off with a question, because speaking of the election, for instance, like. A lot of people are saying that the degree to which Donald Trump won this election, got the electoral vote, got the popular vote, the Republicans gained back the Senate and the House. We have a majority conservative justices, I think, depending on the issue. But a lot of people are calling this sort of a reset. Like this is the American people have spoken and have given their opinion about the direction of this country so far, and are trying to redirect the ship. And so it's almost kind of like we're trying to rebuild society. And so if you, Destry, were the one with the pen and were the one that could determine our next step, if you were going to redesign society from scratch, what are the values or the principles that you would prioritize, and why would you prioritize them?
Well, the right to life would be the first one. That's what I would address. I'll be the first one to tell you I don't know all the nuances of what it is, but I would navigate through that first and foremost. If in a perfect world, right? I don't know what the realities are, but you're asking me what's most important to me. Are you asking, like, if I was running, what would be most important to me, kind of a thing?
Not necessarily running, but you have the power to affect this change.
Yeah.
And right to life is a good one. So why would that be important to you? Why would you say that life has that value?
Because we're created by a creator. And to me, we're going against every character that Christ has told us about himself.
Right.
Whenever we're taking life, whenever he knew us before we were even born.
Right.
He didn't say he knew us in 2 weeks whenever our heart was developed, our lungs are developed. He knew us before he was born.
So this is perfect. You're leading right into the next question,
Good.
Right? Because in this next series of questions, I want to sort of establish a ground rule, because in your support of your opinion, you invoked a creator, you invoked God, right? This outside objective source of morality.
Right.
If we're not allowed to do that, how do we answer the following question? So, let's boil it down to fundamentals, right? Because a lot of in the past weeks, it's been Biden or it's been Harris versus Trump, right? And people justify why they support one or the other. And Harris's XYZ characteristics that I don't agree with, Trump has XY characteristics that I don't agree with, whatever. So let's just take the names, take the political parties out of it, and just say there's an option A and there's an option B that we're presented with, and you and I disagree. You have chosen option A, I've chosen option B. How do we determine the appropriate choice? And we can't invoke an objective. We can't say God. We can't use Bible. We can't use Quran. We can't use that. It's just
right.
You and me. How do we solve that? Because if we're going to say democratically, well, it's 50-50. If we disagree, there is no democratic majority. So how do we solve that dispute?
Well, I'm assuming the person that I'm talking to would if we're talking about the abortion issue, would want to.
Let's take issues out of it.
Okay,
right?
take issues out. Okay, I gotcha.
Option B.
Okay, how do we determine?
You like option A, I like option B. How do we determine in that 50-50 split? How do we determine which one is appropriate?
Is it a popular vote? I mean, are we saying the people that we represent?
Well, mathematically, it can't be a popular vote because it's just a discussion between you and me.
So we're making a decision for everybody else.
The next question will bring that up.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
Right now, it's just you and me. We're the only two people that exist in this conversation.
Arm wrestling.
All right,
we'd arm wrestle.
That's a legitimate response, right? We talk about this in gun clubs sometimes, right?
Yep.
When someone is attacking another person, ideologically, we're having a conversation about the value of lives, right?
Yes. Yep. Right.
And that's not a situation where that's not a situation that's geared towards debate. You can't philosophically sit that person down who's trying to rob you and at gunpoint, and say, look, let's analyze the concepts here and see if you're right in stealing from me or I'm right in protecting myself.
Mm-hmm.
That dispute is solved with arms.
That's right. That's right.
And so, the answer you gave is a legitimate answer. If there is,
if everything else is off the table,
yeah,
if our negotiating,
if there is no possibility for a Democratic majority, if there is no higher power that we can invoke to solve this for us,
right,
then it really comes down to, all right, what else is on the table? We can arm wrestle, we can fight,
whoever
we can take arms, that kind of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of limits our choices.
It does.
So in that situation, what is morally right ends up becoming the result of arms.
Right.
And I'm getting I'm getting a hand wave from Chris. Do
Stuff
we have
went bad.
technical difficulties? Are we out of video?
Oh, maybe one of the cards are.
All right, we're gonna pause for a second.
Boom, boom.
All right. So we're back. We had a little bit of technical difficulties with one of our cameras. When we came in this morning, it looked like one of the cameras, component of it had been broken. So that might be giving us a little issues today, but we'll work around it.
We should get our own studio.
We should.
That's a little foreshadowing there.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That would be cool.
So yeah, where we left off, right? We're solving a dispute between two individuals. Nothing else exists. There is not a possibility of Democratic majority because it's 50-50.
Yep.
So what are our options without invoking something outside of us?
Right.
So the next step is, and let me get this because I want to ask this correctly.
So you posted these on your Facebook page after the election, also.
Yes, because I was interested in other people's thoughts about this because I have friends on both sides of the aisle, and it was interesting to see how the polarizing of these opinions were. And everyone claims what they feel is the moral decision, right? And so I was curious as to why that's the moral decision. So, the first one that we just discussed, if you support option A and I support option B, how do we determine the most appropriate option? There's no Democratic majority. There is no, we're not allowed to invoke something outside of ourselves. Yeah. And so the next one is, if 49% of voters support option A and 51% of voters support option B, how do we, as a society, determine the most appropriate option? Like, what's the moral choice?
Well, I'm totally thinking about. I don't know what the answer is. The only similar thing I can think of is there's two years that when I was racing mountain bikes, that it came down to the last race, and whoever won that last race would win. However, if I would have lost, I would have lost the championship, but I still would have won on points. So I was I had like 51 and they had 50, something like that. But it doesn't matter. That's all a wash now.
Well,
it's the last
that's actually
race.
Kind of an interesting thing because in terms of a bike race, how do you determine the winner of a bicycle race?
The strongest, the most skilled on their bike, handling.
It's there's a physical and a mental aspect of it, right?
Absolutely.
Who's the superior
emotional
competitor, emotionally, physically, mentally, right?
Push through the pain.
Yeah, and so that's potentially one of the answers here. If 49% of voters support option A, 51% voters support option B, how do we determine the most appropriate thing? One potential answer for that is, well, who's physically stronger, right? Because an option for all of these disagreements can potentially be armed conflict, right? And
it's
so,
got a history.
Yeah, so in spite of the fact that there's a majority, 51% support option B, in spite of the fact that there's a majority, there's still an option of physical conflict just to resolve this conflict of ideologies, right?
Right. Yep.
If there's not armed conflict, then how do we determine what's morally correct? We have a majority. do we just go with the majority? Like the majority of people feel that this is right.
Right.
And so do we accept that because it's the majority?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the definition of democracy, right?
Right. Yep.
If we're going to claim that we're purely a democracy, which we can get into to that concept later, but if let's assume for the moment that we are a pure democracy, then wherever that 51% lies, that should determine what is correct, in spite of my opinion.
But who's counting the votes? I'm sorry. I keep going back to the reality of our last couple elections.
Yeah, and I'm trying to isolate as many or like neglect as many variables I can.
Everything being equal.
Yeah, to get it down to the ideology itself.
The ideology,
because we can talk about like was it counted fairly?
Right.
This
but
stuff.
all that is off the table.
Yeah, we're not talking about elections. We're not talking about presidents. We're not talking about political parties.
Right.
We're not even talking about specific issues. We're just saying every vote is counted.
Mm-hmm.
Option A, option B. There is a slight majority for option B. Does that option B become morally right because it has the majority vote?
Have you ever set the timing on a car?
No, but I know the concept.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Before the last 2 weeks, I wouldn't have known anything about it, but I'm buying a car that has a lot of miles on it.
Right.
I was checking the timing belt on it, and since
that's to make the pistons fire in the correct order and the right. Yeah.
There's got to be a true north, right? But you're taking that true north away, and I'm having a difficult time. I'm saying,
how do you set the timing on a car without a clock?
Yeah, you've got. After a while, it's going to start sputtering. It's going to start making noise. Right. And if the timing is not always straight up, if in the next 4 years or next 2 years you decide the timing's off to the right, or off to the left,
you can do it experimentally by self-calibration. But what you're doing is you're setting a temporary standard. It's like saying, okay, I'm gonna assume that this one piston is the standard, and I'm going to adjust everything else based on that.
So that means there's no standard.
Right.
Standards change.
So you might get it right, you might get it wrong. It's purely experimental.
Yep. Right.
And so that's a good analogy. Like in this disagreement, like we don't have the ability to have a clock or an objective standard to compare this to. All we have is piston A, which is 49% of voters, and piston B, which is 51% of voters.
And that's it.
That's it.
There's no timing belt.
Right. So
these pistons are going every which the way they want to go.
Right. And so we have no choice but to pick one of those. And so if we're going to do this logically, we say, well, most of the people, even though it's a small majority, most of the people agree with piston B. So because we have no other standard, we have to assume that piston B is the moral answer.
Because most people want it.
Right.
Most people are saying that this is their belief.
Yes. Now, the third question.
Okay. Am I sweating, Chris? I want to change seats.
So, if 51 supported option A last week, but 51% support option B this week, how do we determine the most appropriate option, or how do we determine the moral choice? Because here, it's the same option, but last week it had a majority. This week it had a minority.
You know who Toby Keith is, right?
Yeah.
You got to stand for something or you fall for anything.
Yep.
I think that was Toby Keith.
Well, in my mind, when you said Toby Keith, my brain defaulted to Toby Mac.
Okay.
From DC Talk. But
Toby Keith was...
Talk, but Toby Keith, the country singer.
Yep. You stand for something or you fall for anything. If you have an open mind enough, things are going to fall out. I know that's not what you're asking. I don't.
Well, I mean, it builds on option 2, right?
Yes.
On question 2, because how did we determine what was right? Without without an objective, then what's moral is what the majority goes for. Well, what happens when the majority changes? the majority last week supported option A.
Right.
But the majority this week supports option B. So does that mean that what is moral changed?
No.
If it's purely a vote,
then yes. If we've taken everything else out, then and that's how we're defining morality. Then yes.
Right. I mean, here's a good example. There are civilizations. Societies like America in its past, a majority supported slavery.
Right.
But then a majority didn't support slavery. So if what is moral is purely based on a democratic vote, does that mean that at one point slavery was morally correct? Was it the moral option?
That's a great point.
Like, is there something outside of a vote that determines what is and isn't morally right?
Majority of people can be wrong.
Yeah. And so in this whole conflict between ideology, it's important to understand, why do I think this issue is wrong, or why do I think this candidate is wrong, or why do I think this platform is wrong? Because all of us are pointing fingers at the other side and saying, you guys are wrong and my side is right. And if we haven't established something objective that's independent of a popular vote or armed conflict or whatever, then all of us are correct. I mean, this is the story of Judges, right?
Yes,
Every
right.
man did that which was right in his own eyes.
Yes.
Today we would call it my truth. What is my truth?
Right.
My
That's
truth
right.
doesn't have to be the same as your truth, because
That's right.
it's my truth. There is no objective truth. And so if that's purely what we're going to use as an arbiter of truth, then no matter how much I might hate a particular candidate, if that candidate gets the popular vote, then it doesn't matter what I think. That is the moral choice, because that's what gained the majority of votes in a purely democratic count. And then next election, if wait, did my side just win in that one?
Right.
Well, in the next election, if it switches, I have no moral argument against that, because what's moral is dependent on what's popular.
So your morality is changing with the popularity.
Right. And so here in John chapter 18, so we're getting to Scripture now. I'm disobeying the rules.
Yes.
But it's because of the example here. Jesus is standing in front of Pilate. And so think about this. The Jews who hate the Roman government because the Roman Empire is the one that came in, conquered them, stripped them of their power. The Sanhedrin no longer has authority. The high priest is no longer of the lineage of Aaron. He's appointed by the Roman Empire. Like, everything that Jews hold dear has been trampled on by the Roman government. And yet, because they hate Jesus so much, they've turned him over to the Roman government and are now invoking the Roman government as the authority in dealing with Jesus, right? And so they're at this ideological conflict. And so Jesus is standing in front of Pilate, and this is John chapter 18, verse 33. Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, Art thou the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, saying, Jesus answered him, saying, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? So in other words, Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus says, are you asking me? Are you saying that I'm the king of the Jews, or did others tell you that I'm the king of the Jews? Like, where is this question coming from? And so Pilate answers, like, am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What have you done? So Pilate's answering him is like, I'm not a Jew. Like, your people are the ones that delivered you to me. So how do we resolve this? Are you the king of the Jews? If so, why did your own people, the Jews, deliver you to me? And so Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I'm a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. So, before we get to the crux of this issue, it's interesting how Jesus answered this, right? He said, because Pilate and Jesus are having this conversation about, is Jesus a king? Is Jesus the king of the Jews? And so, like, are you the king of the Jews? If so, why did the Jews deliver you to me? Because Jews hate us, right? Pilate had this whole, without getting into the history of Pilate, he had this whole thing with the Jews. Like, part of the reason he got into his position was because of his anti-Semitist views, right? He wasn't fond of the Jews. Jews weren't fond of him, except in this scenario. And so Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So Pilate's like, but you are a king, though, because you're using this language of having a kingdom and all this stuff. So maybe not king of the Jews. Are you a king? And so Jesus clarified and says, for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. And I think it's really interesting what Pilate said. Pilate said unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and saith unto them, I find no fault. I find in him no fault at all. But you have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Then cried they all again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber, and that's where the chapter ends. So I think it's interesting that conversation about truth between the two of them, because Jesus said, and I've often asked this question before, like, why did Jesus come into the world? And a lot of people say, to die for our sins, and all that stuff's true. But at its core, why did he come? And he says, this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. And then Pilate responded, like, okay, well, what is truth? And that's what we've been talking about, right? Like, Jesus was saying that there is an objective truth that he bears witness to. And Pilate, because of this issue that was presented to him, he was being presented with differing opinions, all of which were claiming this is true, this is moral, all this kind of stuff. And so he was at this same question, like, well, what is truth? Is truth the majority opinion of the Jews that delivered you to me? Right. Is truth what you're telling me about your identity? What is truth? Like, how do I determine truth? And Jesus answered. He's like, the whole reason I came is to bear witness to the truth. And so
he is the truth.
He is the truth, right?
But you say that to somebody who doesn't believe he is who he is, it doesn't mean that. It didn't mean anything to Pilate, really. Exactly,
which is why those questions. It was important to establish ground rules. Yeah. Like, okay, cool. Let's get rid of the idea that there's God or there's Scripture or that there's even any sort of objective standard that we can draw from.
Because they don't believe. Pilate didn't believe that anyway.
Right.
So let's acknowledge that. Okay.
Well, there was. So going back in the history of the Roman Empire, there was an objective standard. They had like the laws of the empire.
Right.
But here again, the laws of the empire were subject to the political movement of the empire.
Okay.
Right. I mean, they had like the I think they're called the 8 tables or whatever that were like kind of like our 10 commandments.
Okay.
That they sort of believed there was some sort of divine aspect to these that were like the guiding principles of the Roman Empire, but without establishing what that divine aspect was, it still became something that was a human invention. But regardless, the reason this conversation is important is because let's go down the road of not having anything objective to latch onto, then we have to sort of establish something that's objective, and that may or may not be true. Whether that's objective, like the faulty piston, I might say that piston A is going to be my temporary standard that I've assigned. It doesn't mean that piston A is working properly. It just means that I've assumed that to be true without proof.
Yes,
and so in this. in this like crossroads that we're facing, where we have option A and option B, how do we determine the moral choice? Mm-hmm. Well, if it's person to person, we can't fall back on majority. By definition, we can't fall back on an objective source. It's just you and me. Mm-hmm. What else do we have to agree on? I mean, we can. Let's say if it's something experimental, we can run some experiments to see if that's true. But still, that's an objective standard, because we're letting some universal truth decide this on our behalf. Like I agree, or I think that if I drop this ball, I let go of this ball, it'll travel downward. Mm-hmm. You think that when I let go of this ball, it'll travel upward, and we decide, well, let's do the experiment and see what happens, and that will decide truth. That's still invoking an objective standard that's outside of ourselves. So these are things that they're not necessarily subject to experimentation. They're conceptual, they're ideological. What's the moral choice between option A and option B? And you even admitted, if it's 50-50 shot, we're pretty limited in how we can solve that. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we often go to is armed conflict, or some sort of arm wrestle, force against force, and the strongest survive. Right. In a case where there is a majority, we still have that option of force, but without that, we rely on the majority. Mm-hmm. But then when the majority changes, we don't really have anything to fall back on as to say that, well, now the majority is wrong. Mm-hmm. Because we're still invoking an objective standard. We're either invoking an objective standard of the past by saying, like, well, yesterday the majority voted for option A. So even though they switched today, we still have to use that past standard. Mm-hmm. That's still an objective standard. We're using the past, kind of like habeas corpus, standing on things decided, right?
Yes.
But here again, if it's purely subject to a majority, then morality changes. And you really have no basis to say that, well, this is wrong, even though the majority support it, because the majority is the standard. So how do we sort of bring all this together, right? Mm-hmm. In the conversation of what is morally right, in order to have a conversation about that's productive, you almost have to pause on the issue at hand and say, okay, first of all, kind of like in a duel, right? Mm-hmm. Choose your weapon.
Right.
In a conversation about what is moral and what's not, you have to stop and first ask, okay, we need to calibrate our standard first, or we need to synchronize our standard. Mm-hmm. What are we going to use as the standard for morality? Are we going to invoke something objective like God, the Bible, or the Quran, or popular vote, or something like that? Because there has to be a way of solving a disagreement that is outside of the people debating. Like, we have to go to some standard. If the standard is, this is a battle for democracy, we need to preserve democracy, well, then the next question is, okay, then is truth determined by a simple majority? Mm-hmm. If yes, then you can have that conversation. It means that throughout history there has been no right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It's been what's subject to popular vote, and popular vote can change. So I think it's very the political world is very heated nowadays, because of how polarized it's become, and we have an opportunity to be part of that conversation and to bring a little bit of level-headedness to it, not in a Bible thumping way, but just like let's talk about this calmly, and decide, okay, as we engage in this conversation, what is our moral foundation going to be? And let's have that conversation based on that moral foundation. But what it forces us to do as Christians is not always default to, well, the Bible says this.
Yeah.
The other person might not believe in the Bible. But it gives you an opportunity to present why the Bible is a superior source of morality than popular vote or electoral vote or something like that, because it's subjective. And, our founding fathers realized this because they encapsulated the ideology of Scripture in the monuments, in the architecture of...
It's all over Washington.
It's all over Washington. And it wasn't just something they did in the late 1700s. Right. They've done it all throughout our history. I mean, in the 50s when they redid the House chambers, they put the likenesses of the lawmakers, the great lawmakers of history, around the House chamber. And they're all looking left or right except for the one central figure, which was Moses. They're all looking at Moses. And Moses is looking straight ahead across the room to a plaque that says, "In God We Trust," because what they're trying to encapsulate in the architecture of that room was there's all of these different philosophers and lawmakers throughout history that have tried to establish what is moral truth, and they all defer to a divine standard that Moses that Moses penned in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And the foundation of that is morality comes from God. It's in God that we trust. And the laws that we pass in this room, we have to do so with the understanding that there's an objective morality that guides our decisions, that's superior to popular vote, that's superior to armed conflict, that's superior to any other standard that we claim to follow, because any other standard is of human origin, and humans are flawed, and we need an objective standard that's outside of humanity that we can defer to when disagreement comes.
Now, where did you say we could see those statues looking left and right?
In the House chamber.
So the next time President Trump addresses the nation, we can see those, right?
No, because the cameras never pan up to that.
They don't, do they?
Nope. When he's speaking when he's giving the State of the Union address, they never pan up to show right above him. There's a plaque that says, "In God We Trust."
If everybody will watch it, all the listeners watch anything in the House, in the chambers, it never goes up. And that cannot be a mistake.
Right.
You have to do that on purpose.
Yeah.
You have to do that on purpose.
That contradicts with the popular ideology of the day. Yeah, because it's not my truth.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Josh, great discussion, man. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And we have one, maybe 2 more podcasts before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And we're gonna talk about some things that we're thankful for and some of the things we hate. I think that's an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm
Probably.
kidding.
Hopefully we'll get our technical difficulties down. We have
we will.
Broken power cord, it looks like. It keeps knocking out the camera.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Thank you, listeners and viewers. We appreciate y'all. And look for some changes. We're going to be doing some setup changes and everything around here.
We keep experimenting.
We do. We're going to land on it. Thanks, everybody.